If I had to describe that afternoon with one word, I would choose precision. It was so precise that every link was like the gears of a Swiss watch, interlocking perfectly and grinding me into pieces. My name is Huo Chenzhou, 32 years old, co-founder and second largest shareholder of Shengheng Group. I held 17% of the company's original shares, worth $300 million at the current valuation. I earned that equity with 8 years of work, over 300 flights, and countless all-nighters. It may sound unbelievable, but just the day before I was arrested, I was still in a video conference with investors discussing the Series C financing plan. That day was November 17th, a Thursday. At 3 in the afternoon, I was sitting in my office at Shengheng headquarters, reviewing a framework agreement for an overseas client on my computer. The office door suddenly swung open. The person who walked in was my wife, Jiang Wanning. She wore an off-white business suit, her hair pinned up. She looked capable and beautiful. I had been married to her for 4 years, and honestly, every time I saw her, I still had that feeling of this woman is really something. She was 2 years younger than me and served as Shengheng's CFO. She basically handled all the financial matters. But that day, her expression was off. "Huo Chenzhou," Jiang Wanning said, standing at the doorway, "come out for a moment. There is an emergency in the conference room." I asked her what it was, but she didn't answer. She just turned around and walked away. I followed her out. The conference room was at the end of the hallway. When I pushed the door open, there were already 6 people inside. 3 were company executives, and the other 3 I didn't recognize, suited, grim-faced, clearly lawyers or investigators. Jiang Wanning walked to the other side of the long table and sat down, putting the entire length of the table between us. A middle-aged man wearing gold-rimmed glasses stood up, pulled a stack of documents from his briefcase, and pushed them across the table toward me.
Mr.
Huo Chenzhou, I am Fang Heng, head of Shengheng Group's Independent Investigation Committee. After 3 months of investigation, we have ample evidence that over the past 2 years, you embezzled a total of $46 million from the company by forging supplier contracts and inflating project costs. In addition, you leaked core company technical data to a competitor, violating the director's non-compete clause.
My mind buzzed.
What the hell? I didn't even look at the documents. I lifted my head and looked directly at Jiang Wanning. She was staring down at her phone, the screen's light reflecting on her face. Her expression was eerily calm. 4 years of marriage had taught me well. She only wore that expression when everything was completely under her control. "Wanning," I said, "what is this about?" She finally raised her head to look at me. There was no guilt in her eyes, no hesitation, only a kind of calmness I couldn't understand.
"Huo Chenzhou, did you ever think about the consequences when you did these things?"
Her voice wasn't loud, but everyone in the room heard it clearly. "I thought you would at least have a little sense of responsibility toward the company." I froze for a full 3 seconds. In those 3 seconds, the conference room door was pushed open again. 3 people in police uniforms walked in. The leader showed his badge directly. "Huo Chenzhou, you are suspected of occupational embezzlement and infringement of trade secrets. You are now formally summoned in accordance with the law." I watched them approach. A voice in my head screamed, "This is a trap, all of it from beginning to end." That so-called investigation report, the 3 months of so-called investigation, Jiang Wanning's odd behavior today, it was all designed. Without my knowledge, they spent 3 months planting a bomb under my feet, and today at exactly 3:15 on the afternoon of November 17th, they detonated it. As handcuffs were being put on my wrists, I turned my head and glanced at Jiang Wanning. She was taking a document from Fang Heng. I saw the heading on that document clearly, Share Transfer Agreement.
I suddenly laughed.
"You prepared pretty thoroughly," I said.
Jiang Wanning raised her head. Her lips moved as if she wanted to say something, but in the end, she said nothing.
Instead, Fang Heng beside her spoke. "Mr.
Liu, according to the company's Articles of Association and the Founding Partner Agreement, once you are formally under criminal investigation, your shares will be automatically frozen.
If the charges are proven, the shares will be forcibly transferred to the other founders." I closed my eyes and took a deep breath.
4 years of marriage.
8 years of Shengheng, $46 million of so-called embezzled funds, $300 million in equity. What a well-calculated plan. As the police officers escorted me out of the conference room, the corridor was lined with employees on both sides. They didn't know what had happened, just watched as I was led out in handcuffs, whispering to each other with complicated looks. I walked with my head lowered through the crowd. Only one thought filled my mind. Jiang Wanning couldn't have set up such an elaborate trap alone. Someone had to be behind her. I didn't yet know who that person was. The drive from Shanghai headquarters to the City Bureau's Economic Crimes Investigation Unit took 20 minutes. I was taken into an interrogation room and made to sit on a cold iron chair. On the wall opposite, 8 large red characters read leniency to those who confess, severity to those who resist. The interrogation lasted 4 hours. The questions circled over and over. Did you sign the supplier contracts? Are you clear on the flow of funds? How was the core data leaked? I admitted nothing. It wasn't that I was being stubborn. I genuinely hadn't done any of it. I saw those signatures on the supplier contracts. They were well imitated, so good that even I didn't recognize them as fakes at first glance. But fake is fake, and real is real. What is false can never become true. That's what I thought at the time. As it turned out, I was being far too naive. At 10 that night, the interrogation ended. An officer came in and placed a document in front of me.
Huo Chenzhou, the evidence chain in your case is complete.
The procuratorate has approved your arrest. I looked at the arrest warrant, a bright red official seal stamped on the lower right corner. I plead not guilty, I said. The officer glanced at me, said nothing, and simply waved for 2 auxiliary officers to take me away. That night, I was held in the temporary detention cell of the Economic Crimes Investigation Unit. The room was about 6 square meters, with an iron bed, a squat toilet, and a fluorescent light on the wall that stayed on all night. I lay on the bed staring at the ceiling, going over everything that had happened that day from start to finish. An investigation lasting 3 months. That meant Jiang Wanning had started planning at least half a year ago. Those forged contracts and fabricated fund flows, done well enough to withstand police scrutiny, couldn't have been done by her alone. She would need a professional financial team, lawyers, and someone who understood criminal investigation procedures. Jiang Wanning was CFO. The only person around her who could pull that off was one man, Fu Sichen. The moment that name surfaced in my mind, I bolted upright on the bed. Fu Sichen, Jiang Wanning's college classmate and her first love. In the early days of Shanghai, she brought him in to work as a legal consultant for a while. I had objected then, but Jiang Wanning said it was purely professional and that whatever was in the past had long been turned over. I didn't press further because I trusted her. Later, Fu Sichen left after less than a year saying he was going to start his own business. After that, I hardly ever saw him, only occasionally glimpsing chat messages on Jiang Wanning's phone. She said they were just old classmates catching up.
I didn't think much of it.
Looking back now, I was unbelievably stupid. The 3-month investigation period, the legal loopholes exploited in the forged contracts, the clause in the company charter that triggered automatic share transfer upon criminal charges. All of these designs bore the fingerprints of a legal professional. Fu Sichen studied economic law and worked as a criminal defense lawyer for 3 years after graduation. He was far too familiar with the system. I lay back down and closed my eyes. Only one question remained in my mind. Where would they send me tomorrow? The next morning, I found out. Beijiao Detention Center. The transport van drove out of the city center, passed through an industrial area, and went on for about another 40 minutes before finally stopping in front of a large gray gate. The iron gate opened, the van drove in, and the gate closed behind us. I turned to look back. On the other side of that gate was freedom, and on this side was an entirely different world. After completing the admission procedures, my head was shaved and I changed into the standard blue prison uniform. A guard led me through several iron gates and finally stopped in front of a cell. The cell was about 20 square meters, with a long communal bunk along both side walls. 7 or 8 people were already sitting on them. The guard pointed to a spot by the door, said, "You sleep here," and left. The iron door clanged shut. Holding my bedding, I stood at the entrance and swept my gaze over every face in the cell. In the far corner of the bunk sat a man in his 40s. A scorpion was tattooed on his shaved head. He was looking at me with a grin, an expression that felt deeply unsettling, as if he were admiring a piece of prey about to fall into his hands. "New fish," he spoke up. His voice wasn't loud, but everyone in the cell quieted down to listen.
"I hear you're some big-shot finance boss."
I said nothing. A big boss is good.
Big bosses have money.
He stood up and walked toward me, 2 others falling in behind him. In here, no matter how tough you were on the outside, you follow the rules once you're in. Rule number 1, somebody paid to have your life. He said this last part in a lowered voice, so low that only I and the 2 men behind him could hear. My heart sank.
Fu Sichen's reach extended further than I had ever imagined.
The bald man was called Sangya. Everyone in the 3rd block of Beijiao Detention Center knew him, not because of how tough he was on the outside, but because of how well connected he was on the inside. From the guards to the inmates, he could get a line to anyone. A person like that was the most dangerous kind in prison, because he had both connections and no bottom line. Sangya made it very clear someone had paid for my life, 500,000 in cash. 500,000 to buy a life.
Fu Sichen, you really spare no expense.
But Sangya didn't strike immediately. Detention centers have fixed schedules for yard time and labor. With so many eyes around, he needed to wait for the right opportunity. I guessed his plan was to let me live in fear for a few days, then strike when my guard was down. He was skilled at this kind of thing and in no rush for this moment. But he miscalculated one thing.
I had no intention of waiting to die.
On the third evening after admission, after lights out, I lay on my bunk pretending to be asleep while I had actually mapped out everyone's routine in the cell. Sangya and his two lackeys gathered every night around 10:30 after lights out to play cards, betting cigarettes and seasoning packets from instant noodles. They would wrap up around 11:30 and then go to sleep. That window of time would be my only chance to prepare. That night at 11, as Sangya and the other two huddled on the bunk playing cards in hushed voices, I quietly pulled out a piece of scrap metal I had hidden from the workshop during the day, tucked inside the sole of my shoe. It wasn't large, about 3 fingers wide, with one end sharpened to a point. I had spent 3 days grinding it bit by bit against the whetstone in the washroom, until it had a bit of an edge.
I'm no martial arts master.
I took a couple of years of sanda in college and barely practiced after graduation. But there's one thing more important than skill resolve. I knew all too well that in a place like this, the moment you show any weakness, you get devoured down to the bone. The opportunity came on the evening of the 4th day. At 5:30 in the afternoon, work ended and everyone lined up to shower in the washroom. The washroom at Beijiao Detention Center was a large rectangular room, with a dozen or so shower heads mounted in a row without partitions. Once the steam filled the room, you couldn't see clearly beyond a few meters. I had taken a precaution while undressing, wrapping the piece of metal in my towel and carrying it into the washroom. Sangya had clearly arranged things in advance. Less than 3 minutes after I entered the washroom, his two henchmen flanked me from left and right, sandwiching me between them. One of them reached up and shut off the shower head above me. The sound of water splashing everywhere masked everything, as others went about their own business, no one noticing what was happening here. Sangya approached from behind, stripped to the waist. The scorpion tattoo stretching from his lower back to his shoulder looked almost alive in the steam. He leaned close to my ear and said, "Big boss, let's not sleep tonight." As soon as the words left his mouth, the thug on my right punched me hard in the side. The force sent me staggering a step to the left, and the one on the left immediately followed by driving his knee into my stomach. I bit through the pain and stayed on my feet, my right hand gripping the piece of metal inside the towel. Just as Sangya reached out to grab my head and slam it against the wall, I swung the metal shard out with all my strength. It sliced through the mist and raked across Sangya's right arm, opening a gash the length of a palm.
Blood immediately welled up and streamed everywhere in the running shower water.
Sangya looked down at his arm, and his expression shifted from shock to pure savagery.
You actually dare to fight back?
With a roar, the 3 of them stopped holding back and lunged at me at once. I barely fended off 2 more blows, but 1 against 3 with only a scrap of metal in hand. I couldn't hold out for long. Sangya kicked me behind the knee and I dropped to 1 knee. The metal shard in my right hand was stomped on and my wrist was wrenched behind my back. Sangya crouched down and pinched my chin, forcing me to look up. "I was going to let you go quickly," he said, wiping the blood from his arm with his finger and smearing it across my face.
Now I've changed my mind.
"Tonight I'll let you hurt slowly." He stood up and exchanged a look with the other 2.
They understood.
One pressed down on my shoulder, while the other pulled a sharpened toothbrush handle from his waistband. A prison-made shank. A stab with it wouldn't necessarily kill instantly, but if it hit a vital spot, the pain would be excruciating beyond belief. I struggled desperately, but with 2 men pinning me down, I couldn't move at all. As the toothbrush handle was raised, I closed my eyes. Then I heard a dull thud. It was not the sound of plastic stabbing into flesh. It was the sound of a human body crashing heavily onto the floor. I opened my eyes and saw that one of the 2 thugs pinning me down was already on the ground, curled up clutching his stomach. But before the other could react, a hand seized the back of his neck, lifted him like a chicken, and hurled him against the wall. He slid down with a muffled groan. The washroom fell silent for an instant. Sangya spun around, and I raised my head too. Standing in the steam was an old man. He looked to be in his 60s, his hair graying, but his back was ramrod straight. He wore a washed-out gray prison uniform with the sleeves rolled up to his forearms, exposing a pair of hands, knuckles thick and coarse, skin rough as old tree bark, yet every finger radiated an indescribable power. His eyes were the most striking. They were eyes that had seen life and death, murky yet carrying a sharp light you dared not meet directly. Sang Ya clearly recognized him. Old Master Huo, Sang Ya's voice suddenly turned polite, even ingratiating. I'm just taking care of some business here. Could you do me the favor of looking the other way? The old man ignored him. He looked down at the two men on the floor, then at me, and finally fixed his gaze on the gash on Sang Ya's arm. Your name is Sang Ya, right? The old man's voice was deep and steady as an old drum.
I live in the cell next door.
Sang Ya's face flickered, but he stiffened his nerve and said, Old Master, this matter has nothing to do with you. Someone on the outside. I know there's someone on the outside. The old man cut him off. But I'm not in a good mood today. He said it casually, but when Sang Ya heard it, his expression froze completely. The old man walked up to me and looked down. I was covered in blood and water, beaten badly, but I forced myself to stand up. He studied me for a few seconds, then suddenly smiled.
Young man, what's your name?
Huo Chenzhou.
Huo Chenzhou, he repeated as if tasting the name in his mouth, then nodded.
Come with me.
He turned and walked out. Sang Ya stood rooted to the spot, his lips moving but not daring to utter a single word. I picked up my towel from the floor, wrapped it around my waist, and followed the old man out of the washroom. The corridor lights were dim. He walked ahead, his pace unhurried, but every step was steady. After about 10 steps, I couldn't help asking, Why did you help me? He didn't turn around. His voice drifted back from ahead.
Because you remind me of someone?
Who?
He didn't answer. His step paused for barely a beat, then he continued walking forward. That night, I lay on my bunk with my eyes open until dawn. Sang Ya and his two lackeys returned in the second half of the night. Not one of them glanced at me. They silently crawled onto their own bunks and slept. The next morning, during yard time, I deliberately edged up to an old inmate who had been inside for more than 2 years. I pointed at Huo Zhenting, who was sitting some distance away sunning himself, and asked quietly, What's the old man's background? The old inmate looked at me, then at Huo Zhenting. Suddenly he lowered his voice and answered with a tone bordering on reverence.
Him.
Before he came in, half the business on this circuit had the surname Huo.
I froze.
The old inmate's words circled in my head all day. Half the business on this circuit had the surname Huo, for someone who had been locked up for over 2 years to speak of him with such awe. Huo Zhenting was absolutely no ordinary figure on the outside. But what I couldn't figure out was, if he really had that much power, how had he ended up in a place like Beizhou Detention Center? Given his age and status, even if he had really committed a crime, he should have been held in a provincial prison or a special unit, not crammed in with ordinary inmates sharing a public bathhouse. That question nagged at me all day. From breakfast to dinner, I observed Huo Zhenting. He was indeed different from everyone else. At breakfast, everyone queued for porridge. Huo Zhenting ambled over with his bowl, and the crowd automatically parted to let him through. No one gave an order. No one organized it. Everyone just naturally shifted aside. That way of making way, like a bodily instinct, spoke louder than any command. During the meal, he sat alone in a corner. No one dared to sit with him. When a guard passed by, he glanced at Huo Zhenting and actually nodded, his expression entirely different from the one he wore when dealing with other inmates. These details were small, but strung together they painted a very clear picture in this place. Huo Zhenting possessed a certain influence that transcended the rules. I was crystal clear on one thing. The matter with Sang Ya was not over. Fu Sichen had paid $500,000 to have me killed. The money was spent, the job wasn't done, and someone like Sang Ya wouldn't let it go. Not because he was afraid of Fu Sichen, but because he was afraid of damaging his own reputation. In a place like this, credibility was currency. If you took a job and couldn't finish it, no one would come to you for business again. So I had to find out, before Sang Ya's next attempt, who exactly Huo Zhenting was, why he had helped me, and whether he would help me again. The answer came faster than I imagined. On the afternoon of the 5th day, during work hours in the workshop, the work assigned to the inmates at Beizhou Detention Center was making plastic woven bags. Rows of old sewing machines lined up in 2 columns, humming noisily. I was assigned to a spot by the window in the 3rd row. Sang Ya's 2 henchmen were in the 2nd row. All day I could feel their eyes on my back, like 2 sticky tongues. Huo Zhenting was in the last row of the workshop, stacking finished products.
He didn't operate any machines.
He just sat there, neatly stacking the woven bags sent over from the front. No one in the entire workshop found it odd, as if the arrangement that Huo Zhenting should sit while others worked was completely natural. Mid-afternoon, something happened in the workshop. It wasn't about me. It was about Huo Zhenting. Guard Lao, he, a lean man in his 40s, usually fairly polite to the inmates, suddenly walked up to Huo Zhenting, pointed at the stack of woven bags he had piled, and said loudly, "What kind of mess is this? Crooked and uneven. Take them apart and restack them." The sound of machines in the workshop suddenly dimmed a little. Dozens of pairs of eyes secretly glanced over. Huo Zhenting looked up at Lao He without a word, stood up, pushed over the stack, and started restacking them one by one. His movements weren't fast, but they were steady. Every single bag was folded perfectly neat. Lao He stood watching for a few seconds, finding nothing to criticize. His pride obviously stung. He added, "Don't dawdle from now on. This isn't a retirement home for you."
That remark was out of line.
Huo Zhenting's hands paused for a split second. Just a moment. Not even half a second. Then he continued stacking. But in that half second, I saw the expression on Lao He's face change. His Adam's apple bobbed, and he took a small half-step backward. The movement was subtle, but from the third row I saw it clearly. A guard in his own workshop had taken half a step back from an inmate.
Huo Zhenting hadn't made any threatening move.
He hadn't even looked up at Lao He. He just kept stacking his woven bags, but the air in the workshop felt like it had solidified. Lao He cleared his throat and turned away. And just like that, the incident passed. But it shook me deeply. I began observing Huo Zhenting even more closely, trying to catch any clues. The big scene came on the 6th day. Sang Ya had somehow gotten hold of a screwdriver, sharpened it, and hidden it in a crack between the bricks under his bunk. I didn't know this beforehand. It was Hao Zi who told me later. Hao Zi's real name was Hao Zi, but everyone called him Rat because he was so skinny. He was the lowest status inmate in the cell, responsible for emptying the toilet bucket and cleaning up, and anyone could kick him around. Rat told me later that Sang Ya wasn't planning to strike in a crowded place this time. His plan was to wait until I got up to use the toilet in the middle of the night, then stab me directly in the toilet, hitting a vital spot and slip away immediately. By the time my body was discovered at dawn, it'd already be cold. But the plan was blocked at its source before it could ever be executed. On the evening of the 6th day, right after roll call, as soon as the guard left, Huo Zhenting came over from the neighboring cell. He didn't bring anyone, just himself standing at the entrance to our cell. The iron door was locked, so he couldn't come in. But through the iron bars he cast a look inside. Just one look, and the cell fell silent.
Sang Ya was sitting on the bunk.
When he saw Huo Zhenting at the door, his face paled instantly. He rose to his feet involuntarily, his hand reaching unconsciously toward the space under the bunk.
Huo Zhenting spoke.
"Sang Ya, I didn't make myself clear enough last time," he said, his tone flat as if chatting about the weather.
"I won't stop you from taking money to do a job, but this person you cannot touch." The muscles on Sang Ya's face twitched. "Old master, my brothers on the outside are waiting for word from me. If this doesn't get done, I can't give them an explanation." Huo Zhenting was silent for a couple of seconds. Then he said something, his voice not loud, but every word rang out clearly. "The brother on the outside you're talking about is your boss Zhao Dongsheng, right? Take him a message for me. Tell him," Huo Zhenting said, "in protecting this man, Huo Chenzhou. Let him weigh it himself." Sang Ya's face went utterly white. Zhao Dongsheng. It'd seen that name in the news on the outside. The biggest underground banker in North City, with hundreds of men under him, a man who could navigate both the legal and the criminal worlds with ease. In the outside world, he was the kind of person you absolutely did not want to cross. But from Huo Zhenting's mouth, the name Zhao Dongsheng rolled off as casually as mentioning the neighbor's kid next door. Sang Ya opened his mouth as if to speak, but all that squeezed out was, "You know my big brother?" Huo Zhenting didn't answer the question. He simply turned around and, with his back to Sang Ya, said something that silenced the entire cell. "Within 3 days, the matter of my transfer to a provincial-level prison will be settled. Before I leave, if you so much as touch a single hair on his head, even that big brother of yours on the outside won't be able to protect you." He finished and walked away. His unhurried footsteps echoed down the corridor, growing farther and farther, until finally swallowed up by the sound of an iron door opening and closing.
A long silence hung over the cell.
Sang Ya dropped onto the bunk, his face ashen, his hands trembling. His 2 lackeys exchanged a glance and silently moved to the bunks farthest from me. I sat on my own bunk, my mind churning. He had just said the matter of my transfer will be settled.
Not "I hope to be transferred," not "someone is arranging my transfer," but "will be settled," a verb used by someone in a position of power assigning a task.
Meaning the transfer was not something being done for him by others. It was something he himself had arranged. He could even set a timeline for it within 3 days. An old man in his 60s, sitting in a detention center, saying he would arrange his own transfer to a provincial prison within 3 days, as casually as booking a plane ticket for a business trip. Who exactly was this man? I suddenly remembered what he said to me in the washroom 5 days earlier. Because you remind me of someone.
Remind him of whom?
And why did that tone carry a hint of softness, almost imperceptible? I lay on the bed, staring at the stained ceiling, and a wild thought suddenly sprouted from the bottom of my heart, then spread like weeds. I had known since I was a child that I was adopted. My adoptive parents never hid it from me. When I was 3 years old, they brought me home from an orphanage in a small southern city, gave me a complete childhood, put me through school, and watched me climb step by step to where I was today. They treated me so well that I never wanted to ask about my biological parents. But now I couldn't help thinking about it. The way Huo Zhenting looked at me, his tone of voice, that moment when he saved me in the washroom. Hidden inside those things there seemed to be a possibility I had never touched before. I turned over and shoved the absurd thought down.
Stop imagining things, Huo Chenzhou.
The man saved your life, nothing more.
Don't flatter yourself. But that thought was like a gourd in water. Push it down, and it popped right back up. No matter what, it just wouldn't sink. Huo Zhenting meant what he said. He said the transfer would be settled within 3 days, and the very next afternoon, word came. It wasn't passed on through the guards. A car from the Provincial Prison Administration Bureau arrived directly. 4 men got out, 2 in uniform and 2 in plain clothes, and walked straight into the warden's office. The scene didn't look like a routine transfer. It looked more like they were picking up an important person. When Huo Zhenting left, he passed by the door of my cell. Through the iron bars, he glanced at me. He said nothing, and I said nothing. But that look he gave me, I kept turning it over in my mind for a long time. There was scrutiny in it, hesitation, and a kind of heaviness I couldn't name. On the 3rd day after he left, Sang Ya was transferred to another block. The guard came on his own to make the arrangements. No reason was given. He was simply told to pack up and change cells. When Sang Ya left, he didn't even dare to look at me. The boss-like arrogance he once flaunted across Beijiao Detention Center shattered completely in the 72 hours after Huo Zhenting's departure. I thought that with Huo Zhenting gone, this chapter was closed.
I was wrong.
On the morning of the 7th day, Guard Lao he called me out of the workshop.
Huo Chenzhou, someone's here to visit you.
I froze.
In all this time, no one had come to see me. Jiang Wanning wouldn't come. Fu Sichen even less so. My adoptive parents lived far away in a small southern town. I hadn't even told them about my situation.
Who would visit me?
The visitation room was on the east side of the block, a row of cubicles separated by bulletproof glass, each side with a telephone receiver. I walked in and saw through the glass a complete stranger. A man around 40, in a suit and tie, wearing rimless glasses, a black briefcase placed in front of him. When he saw me sit down, he picked up the phone.
I did the same.
Mr.
Huo Chenzhou, my name is Gujing Chuan, Mr.
Huo Zhenting's personal attorney.
His voice was very steady, every word enunciated clearly. I'm here today on Mr. Huo's instructions. There are a few things I need to confirm with you. I held the phone and said nothing, waiting for him to continue. Gujing Chuan pulled a document out of his briefcase and pressed it against the glass for me to see. It was a DNA paternity test report. Staring through the glass at those lines, my pupils suddenly constricted. At the very bottom of the report, in bold print, was a line that read, "Based on the available data and DNA analysis, the result supports that Huo Zhenting is the biological father of Huo Chenzhou." The hand holding the phone began to tremble. Gu Jingchuan clearly expected this reaction. He put the report away and pulled out another stack of documents, flipped to a certain page, and again pressed it to the glass. It was an adoption record from an orphanage. The paper was yellowed, the edges curled, the handwriting in fountain pen. At age 3, you were adopted by the Liu couple from the South City orphanage. Before you were sent to the orphanage, your name was Huo Chenzhou. Huo Chenzhou. For 29 years, my surname had been Liu.
Only today did I learn my real surname was Huo.
Your mother's name was Shen Ruoshi.
32 years ago, she was a surgeon at South City People's Hospital. The year you were born, Mr. Huo was placed under formal investigation for a business case involving foreign entities. Word came that someone intended to harm his family. To protect you, your mother, in the middle of the night, entrusted someone to send you out of North City. She planned to bring you back once the storm passed, but she never lived to see that day. Gu Jingchuan's tone was very calm, as if reading from a legal document, but every word drove into my ears like a nail. She died the year I was born. I heard my own voice, hoarse beyond recognition. Gu Jingchuan was silent for a second, then nodded. A car accident. The brakes had been tampered with. It was later determined to be the work of one of Mr.
Huo's mortal enemies at the time.
Mr. Huo spent 2 years sending that man to prison, but afterward he began searching for you everywhere. The chain your mother used to get you out was broken. The middleman died in a car accident, and your trail vanished. He paused here, adjusted his glasses. Until Mr. Huo saw you in the washroom of Beijiao Detention Center. I closed my eyes. The washroom.
The steam.
That old man standing in the mist, looking down at me, his murky eyes suddenly sharp and bright. He had said, because you remind me of someone. He was thinking of my mother.
My real mother.
He searched for me for 29 years?
I asked.
Strictly speaking, 32 years, Gu Jingchuan corrected me. From the year you were born and the incident occurred, to age 3 when you were adopted and all clues were lost, to 6 days ago when he recognized you in the washroom, 32 years without ever stopping. I took a deep breath and forcibly pushed down the surge of emotion rising from my chest.
Where is he now?
Provincial No. 1 prison, special unit. His case and your case intersect, which is one of the reasons he stayed in the detention center for so long. He was waiting.
Gu Jingchuan looked me in the eye.
Mr. Huo asked me to relay a message to you.
What message?
He said 30 years ago he couldn't protect your mother. So 30 years later, there's no way he would let anything happen to you. I put the phone down and buried my face in my hands. Light from the barred window filtered through the glass and fell on the backs of my hands. It was warm, but my whole body felt as if I had been soaked in ice water, cold from head to toe.
32 years.
I never knew who I really was. Never wanted to probe into my biological parents because my adoptive parents treated me so well that probing felt like a betrayal. But now someone was telling me that my biological father had searched for 32 years. From when I was a swaddled infant to when I was pinned to the floor in the washroom of Beijiao Detention Center. I picked up the phone again. Attorney Gu, I need you to do something for me.
Go ahead.
Help me find out exactly how much Jiang Wanning and Fu Sichen manipulated my case.
Gu Jingchuan smiled slightly.
It was a very professional smile, but there was a sharp glint in his eyes. Mr. Huo has already arranged this. My visit today, besides conveying your identity, has a second purpose. He pulled another document from his briefcase, much thicker than the previous ones, probably 20 or 30 pages. This is the preliminary review of your case conducted by my legal team over the past 72 hours. The conclusion is simple. Over 90% of the prosecution's evidence is forged. The remaining 10% are business decisions twisted to look incriminating. We are confident we can overturn the entire evidence chain within 2 weeks. He flipped the document to the last page and pointed at the signatures on the lower right corner for me to see. Stamped there was the official seal of Jingheng Law Firm, along with the signatures of 5 attorneys.
Jingheng, one of the top 3 criminal defense firms in the country. Huo Zhenting's private legal team.
I stared at that document for a long time. 2 weeks?
I asked.
Conservative estimate.
Gu Jingchuan closed his briefcase.
Mr. Huo's original words were 10 days. 10 days to overturn the case. Counting from the day Jiang Wanning and Fu Sichen set me up and threw me into this detention center, today was exactly the 17th day. If what Gu Jingchuan said was true, in another 10 days, I could walk out. But Huo Zhenting's own estimate was 4 days shorter than his attorney's. That detail made my heart clench sharply. Attorney Gu, I have one question. Please, Mr.
Huo, my father, can he get out with me?
The professional smile on Gu Jingchuan's face dimmed for an instant, then returned.
Mr.
Huo's case is more complicated, but we will do everything in our power.
Let's not discuss that today, he said, standing up and giving me a slight bow through the glass.
Mr. Liu, the next time I come, I will be bringing the verdict of acquittal. He turned and walked away. I sat in the chair in the visitation room, watching through the glass as his figure disappeared behind the iron door. The receiver in my hand held only the busy tone. I hung up, stood up, and followed the guard back to the cell. I said nothing the entire way. Only one thought churned over and over in my mind. My surname is Huo. My name is Huo Chenzhou. My mother was named Shen Ruoxi. 32 years ago, to protect me, she sent me, a newborn in swaddling clothes, out of North City. My father is named Huo Zhenting. 32 years later, in a steam-filled bathhouse, he recognized me.
I didn't think about anything else now.
I just wanted to get out, and then, one by one, take back everything that was owed to me. Gu Jingchuan did not boast. On the 9th day, a notice arrived from the court. My trial was scheduled for 5 days later. Normally, for a complex economic case like this, Scheduling alone would take at least 2 or 3 months. Getting a court date in half a month. I didn't dare imagine the sheer power being wielded behind the scenes. On the day of the trial, wearing a dark gray suit that Gu Jingchuan had sent in ahead of time, I was escorted by court officers from the detention center directly to the courthouse. As I walked into the courtroom, I saw the gallery. In the first row sat Gu Jingchuan and his legal team, 4 of them all in dark suits, with a thick stack of case files in front of them. In the second row, by the aisle, sat a middle-aged woman wearing sunglasses. Her hair was pinned up impeccably, and an Hermes bag sat beside her hand.
I recognized her instantly.
Jiang Wanning. Beside her, one empty seat away, sat Fu Sichen. The moment our eyes met, the corner of Jiang Wanning's mouth twitched slightly. That half-smile reminded me of her expression that day in the conference room, calm, restrained, everything under control. She probably thought she was here today to watch me be formally convicted and sentenced. Fu Sichen didn't look at me. He stared down at his phone the whole time, his fingers typing rapidly, busy with something unknown. The presiding judge declared the trial open.
The prosecutor first read the indictment.
The charges matched the investigation committee's earlier conclusions: forging supplier contracts, inflating project costs, embezzling $46 million of company funds, and leaking core technical data. The evidence included 6 original contracts bearing my signature, 3 bank transfer records, and an encrypted email allegedly sent by me to a competitor. When Gu Jingchuan stood up, the courtroom fell silent for a moment.
Your Honor, the defense requests a forensic examination of all documentary evidence submitted by the prosecution.
He pulled a stack of documents from the case files and handed it to the bailiff to present to the bench. These are forensic reports commissioned by our side from 3 separate institutions with judicial authentication qualifications. The conclusions are unanimous. The signatures on all 6 original contracts are not those of my client, Huo Chenzhou. Computer analysis of the handwriting similarity shows the highest match is only 67%, and the lowest less than 40%.
These signatures were deliberately imitated.
The judge flipped open the forensic reports and his brow furrowed. Gu Jingchuan didn't give him room to breathe. He pulled out a second set of documents. Regarding the bank transfer records, we obtained the complete transaction history of the accounts in question. The so-called embezzled funds actually flowed into accounts of 3 shell companies registered overseas. And the actual controllers of these 3 companies, according to our investigation, are all entities connected to Mr. Fu Sichen. In the gallery, Fu Sichen's typing fingers stopped.
Gu Jingchuan continued. As for the so-called leaked email, our technical team reconstructed the email's original transmission path.
The email was indeed sent from Shanghai Group's servers, but the time of sending was 3:12 in the morning. Between 1 and 5 that morning, my client was at Shanghai Pudong Airport waiting for a delayed international flight. The airport's full surveillance footage and facial recognition records can confirm this. He laid the 3 pieces of evidence before the bench in turn, then turned to face the prosecution.
Your Honor, the only criminal acts that have been proven to exist in this case were not committed by my client.
Someone meticulously planned and systematically fabricated false evidence to pin a completely non-existent crime on him. Our side has compiled the complete chain of evidence and has formally reported to the police. The targets of the complaint for framing and evidence fabrication are Jiang Wanning and Fu Sichen. The courtroom erupted. People in the gallery whispered to each other. The composure on Jiang Wanning's face finally cracked. She turned her head to look at Fu Sichen. His face had changed too, but differently. He wore the taut expression of someone exposed in public, rapidly switching to defensive mode. The trial lasted a full 6 hours. Gu Jingchuan's team dismantled every charge thoroughly. Every piece of false evidence met with powerful counterproof. By the end, even the prosecutor's tone had shifted from initial aggression to procedural routine. At 7 in the evening, the presiding judge announced the verdict. This court finds that the facts alleged by the prosecution accusing the defendant Huo Chenzhou of occupational embezzlement and infringement of trade secrets are unclear and the evidence insufficient. All charges are dismissed. The defendant Huo Chenzhou is found not guilty. The gavel fell, acquitted and released in court. I stood in the dock and took a deep breath. Gu Jingchuan walked over and patted my shoulder, saying quietly, "The car is outside."
Mr. Huo is waiting for a call.
I nodded and turned toward the gallery. Jiang Wanning was still sitting there, every trace of color drained from her face. Her hands clutched the handle of her Hermes bag so tightly her knuckles were white. Fu Sichen was already on his feet, walking briskly toward the exit with his head down, not daring to even glance this way. I didn't chase after them, and I didn't say a word. It wasn't the time yet. Outside the courthouse, A black Rolls-Royce was waiting. The license plate read, North a 00006. The door opened, and a driver in a black uniform inclined his head slightly toward me.
Mr.
Whoa, please get in.
Miss
Huo.
When those two words landed on my ears, an indescribable emotion surged inside me. From Huo Chenzhou to Huo Chenzhou, the change of a single word spanned 32 years and an elaborately designed wrongful imprisonment. I got into the car. The car didn't head straight home. It drove first to provincial number
1 prison.
Across that high wall, I couldn't see Huo Zhenting in person, but Gu Jingchuan connected a video call for him. On the phone screen, Huo Zhenting sat on a chair. The wall behind him was white, and the light was bright. He looked much better than he had in the detention center. His hair was trimmed, his beard cleanly shaved. He saw the suit I was wearing and the Rolls-Royce behind me, and smiled.
You got out?
I got out, I said.
How does it feel?
I thought for a moment, then said, faster than I expected. Huo Zhenting leaned back in his chair. Those murky but still sharp eyes stared at the screen for a few seconds. Then he said something that made me freeze on the spot.
If your mother were still alive, seeing you standing here today, she would be very proud.
The hand holding the phone trembled.
Dad.
I said this word for the first time in 32 years. How much longer do you have to stay in there? Huo Zhenting waved his hand, as if shooing away a fly.
Don't worry about my business.
Old Gu will handle it.
The thing you need to do right now is not worry about me.
His voice deepened, carrying a coldness tempered by decades in a rough world. It's to go take back, one by one, everything that was stolen from you.
I know.
You know nothing. Huo Zhenting suddenly laughed like an old rogue.
Do you even know how?
I paused, then laughed too. I can learn if I don't, I said. After all, I'm your son. Huo Zhenting stopped laughing. He stared at me for a long moment, his eyes rimmed red, but he stubbornly held back the tears. In the end, he said only one word.
Good.
The video call ended. I handed the phone back to Gu Jingchuan and leaned back against the genuine leather seat of the Rolls-Royce, closing my eyes. The city's nightscape rushed backward outside the window, neon lights sweeping across my face in patches. In my mind, I began planning the first move.
Jiang Wanning.
Shengheng Group.
My 17% stake, starting tomorrow, one by one. The day after my acquittal, I showed up at the entrance of Shengheng Group's headquarters building. To be precise, that Rolls-Royce with the license plate North A00006 pulled up directly in front of Shengheng Tower's main entrance. The driver got out and opened the door for me. Wearing a tailored navy blue suit, I stepped out and looked up at the building.
8 years.
I had built Shengheng from a 30-square-meter rented room with nothing but an idea and a belly full of ambition into this 26-story tower. The logo on the rooftop was something I personally designed, deep blue English letters that, when lit up at night, could be seen from 3 kilometers away. Now the people inside this building had erased my name from the list of founders. I walked into the lobby. The receptionist girl saw me and froze for a moment. Then her face visibly changed. She must have seen the news. Huo Chenzhou acquitted. Shengheng Group CFO under investigation for framing. The news had been released early that morning, arranged by Gu Jingchuan, pushed as a headline notification, covering the entire internet.
President Liu.
The girl stood up, her voice trembling.
What floor is Jiang Wanning on?
I asked. President Jiang. She didn't come in today. I nodded. Expected. Someone formerly under police investigation would indeed find it awkward to show up at the company. But the company was still running, the board was still there, the shareholders were still there, and Shengheng stock was still trading on the secondary market. That was enough. I turned and walked out of the lobby, got back in the car and dialed a number on my phone. Old Gu, let's begin. On the other end of the line, Gu Jingchuan's voice was calm and efficient. Everything is already arranged.
Rock Capital, under Mr.
Huo's name, formally submitted the announcement of its 5% stake in Shengheng to the Securities Regulatory Commission at 9 this morning. Our holdings have now reached 5.3%. Rock Capital, the largest investment platform under Huo Zhenting's name, with over 40 billion in liquid capital on the books. The day before my acquittal, Huo Zhenting had sent me a document through his attorney, a power of attorney for equity voting rights. He had fully entrusted me with 62% of his voting rights in Rock Capital. I can't get out to help you fight, but my money can. Those were his exact words. In the next 72 hours, Shengheng Group's stock price rode a roller coaster the likes of which it had never seen. On the first day, when the news of Rock Capital's stake disclosure broke, the stock price surged 18%. The market smelled a battle for control, and speculative money swarmed in. The turnover rate shot up to 21%. Sitting in Rock Capital's office on North City's Financial Street, I faced 6 display screens, watching the numbers on the ticker cascade down and rocket up like a waterfall. The chief trader was named Zhe, 37 years old, short hair, black-framed glasses, the sharpest capital hunter under Huo Zhenting. He stood beside me, rattling off data at top speed. President Huo Chenzhou's free float is about 38% of total shares, of which institutional investors hold 19%, retail investors 19%. Jiang Wanning's direct and indirect holdings total around 21%, making her the single largest shareholder. But she's currently restricted from leaving the country, so she can't make any major capital moves. I stared at the candlestick chart on the screen and said, any movement from the institutional side? 3 public mutual funds have already quietly contacted our traders, willing to transfer their holdings at the right price. Combined with what we sweep from the secondary market, reaching over 15% within a week is no problem.
Not enough. I shook my head.
What I want isn't the position of largest shareholder.
I want absolute control. 51%. Not a point less. Xie Zheng glanced at me, a spark of excitement in his eyes. People in his profession don't love making money most. They love fighting a big battle. And what I was about to wage was a war of annihilation to decide everything in one move. The next day, I played my first card. Gu Jingchuan arranged for me to meet Shengheng's third largest shareholder, a private equity fund called Yongli Capital. Its head, surnamed Meng, was in his 50s, known in the circle for his shrewdness. He held 12% of Shengheng's shares. For years he had voted in lockstep with Jiang Wanning, and never picked the wrong side. We met in a private club on the top floor of the China World Trade Center Tower 3. President Meng sat down and sized me up for a long moment, then smiled. President Huo, no, I should call you President Huo now. This change of identity of yours is a bit fast.
This old man has trouble keeping up.
President Meng is too kind, I said, pouring him a cup of tea.
I didn't ask you here today to exchange pleasantries.
I know you're here for Shengheng shares.
He took a sip of tea. Honestly, Jiang Wanning called me yesterday as well. She told me to hold steady, that the current situation is only temporary and shall resolve everything soon.
Do you still believe her words?
President Meng said nothing. I had Gu Jingchuan pass a document to him. This is a financial audit report on Shengheng Group commissioned by me from a third-party firm. Over the past 2 years, Jiang Wanning, through a series of connected transactions, transferred at least 200 million in cash from the company's books to accounts of shell companies controlled by Fu Sichen. This hole in the funds will be exposed sooner or later. Once it blows, Shengheng's stock price will be cut in half directly. President Meng, when that happens, what will your 12% stake be worth? President Meng's face changed. He flipped through the report page by page. The more he read, the worse his expression became.
What do you plan to do?
He raised his head, the look in his eyes when he regarded me completely different now. Continue sweeping the secondary market. The institutional side is already in talks. Your 12% is just one piece of the puzzle. I didn't hide anything. But if you sell to me now, I can give you a decent exit price. If you continue to side with Jiang Wanning, after I take control on my own, that 12% in your hand will become a piece of waste paper. President Meng, you're a smart man. This kind of multiple choice question doesn't need me to solve it for you.
President Meng was silent for about a minute.
Then he raised his teacup and drained it in one gulp.
What's your offer?
15% above market price, I said. The condition is signing today and transferring ownership within 3 days. He was silent for another half a minute, then extended his hand. Deal. I shook his hand and felt the slight sweatiness of it. He was nervous. For an old fox who had been navigating the capital markets for 30 years to get nervous, it meant he was beginning to realize one thing: Jiang Wanning's ship was going down. On the 3rd day, the news began to ferment. Financial media covered the battle for control of Shengheng Group relentlessly. Headlines like mysterious billion-dollar heir, founders counterattack, and the battle for Shengheng's control dominated the front pages of every major news app. Jiang Wanning's past was dug up completely. Her relationship with Fu Sichen was exposed, and some media even unearthed their college photos from years ago. I sat in my office, scrolling through the news on my phone, expressionless. Xie Zheng pushed the door open and placed a data report on my desk. President Huo, as of today's close, Our holdings in Shengheng have reached 28.6%. Combined with the 12% just transferred from Yongli Capital, our actual control stands at 40.6%. 10.4% left, I said. Continue tomorrow. No need to wait for tomorrow, Xie Zheng grinned. There is a vice president under Jiang Wanning, surnamed Zhou, in charge of operations. He holds about 3-point-something% in options. He just reached out to us voluntarily, willing to transfer.
His condition?
He wants to meet you.
Have him come.
Xie Zheng nodded and turned to leave. I stood up and walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows, looking down at the city below. North City's nightscape was always brilliantly lit, streams of cars like golden rivers threading through a canyon of steel and concrete. This office was on the 52nd floor, and from the window I could just see the rooftop of Shengheng Tower. That blue logo on the rooftop glowed in the night, just as beautiful as when I first lit it up 8 years ago.
My phone vibrated.
Gu Jingchuan had sent a message. Jiang Wanning's lawyer has contacted me proactively.
She wants to meet with you.
I looked at this message and the corner of my mouth curved slightly.
She wants to meet?
Fine. Once you see me sitting in the chairman's office of Shengheng Group, then we can have a good talk. I tucked the phone back into my pocket, turned from the window, walked back to my desk, and picked up the landline to dial an internal number.
Xie Zheng at the opening tomorrow. Continue the sweep.
On the other end, Xie Zheng's voice carried a smile. Understood, President Huo. The place Jiang Wanning chose for our meeting was her own pick, the president's office on the 26th floor of Shengheng Tower. She said it was her home turf, but when I pushed open the mahogany doors with Gu Jingchuan and 2 assistants behind me, I saw her sitting behind the wide executive desk. Her expression was more like that of a cornered animal. The office was still the same floor-to-ceiling windows, leather sofas, her favorite abstract painting on the wall. The only difference was a file box sitting open on the coffee table, with scattered contracts and receipts inside. It looked like she had been frantically searching for any weapon she could use before I arrived. Unfortunately, it was already too late. I sat down in the chair opposite her. No pleasantries, no opening words.
Gu Jingchuan placed a thick craft paper dossier on the coffee table and stepped back.
Jiang Wanning's gaze fell on that dossier, then shifted back to my face. She wore heavy makeup, covering most of her face, but it couldn't hide the red veins in her eyes. Did you see the stock price downstairs when you came in? She suddenly smiled, her voice a bit dry. Congratulations, you're up 20 points on paper. I didn't come here to discuss stock prices, I said. I came to show you a few things. I pulled the first document from the dossier, placed it on the coffee table, and slid it toward her. It was a bank transfer receipt, dated March 7 years ago. The recipient was a company account called Jingwei Trading, and the transfer amount was exactly 2 million. The remitter was Jiang Wanning. 7 years ago, Shengheng had just completed its Series A financing, raising 60 million. On the 3rd day after the funds arrived, you transferred 2 million out of the company account and sent it to Jingwei Trading. The legal representative of this company is Fu Sichen, and the registered address is a virtual address that doesn't exist at all in that industrial park. Jiang Wanning's smile stiffened. You told me back then that the money was for paying a supplier's advance. I believed you? But after the money arrived, Jingwei Trading, in 42 separate transactions over 3 months, transferred it all into Fu Sichen's personal account. I pulled out a second document. 5 years ago, the Series B financing brought in 100 million. You transferred 800,000 in 3 installments, the path almost identical to the last. Only the shell company was changed, this time called Shengyuan Technology.
Legal representative, again Fu Sichen.
A third document. 3 years ago, on the eve of the company's share reform, you moved another 500,000. That 500,000 was a financial consulting fee you approved for your own department as a bonus, but the money ultimately flowed into the account of Fu Sichen's mother. I laid the transfer records one by one on the coffee table, lining them up in a row. Jiang Wanning was silent for a long moment. Then she said quietly, "Those accounts have all been balanced. There are no issues in the financial records."
I laughed. You're right. The books are balanced.
Because every time you moved money out, you created a fake procurement contract in the next quarter to plug the hole. The supplier names were fake, the contract seals were fake, even the receiving addresses were fake. Over 8 years, you stole a total of 15 million from the company and fed every bit of it to that dog Fu Sichen. I reached out and pulled another stack of items from the dossier. This time it wasn't documents, it was photos. About 20 or 30 of them. I placed them one by one on the coffee table, weighing down the transfer receipts beneath them. The photos showed a hotel lobby, a parking garage, a late-night street, a man and woman walking shoulder to shoulder under a street lamp. The man was Fu Sichen. The woman was Jiang Wanning. The most recent one was taken on September 12th this year, less than 70 days before she sent me to the detention center. The Ritz-Carlton North City, room 1827, Fu Sichen's long-term booking. The hotel's check-in records were crystal clear. Over the past 2 years, Jiang Wanning had stayed in that room a total of 53 times.
Jiang Wanning stared at those photos.
The makeup on her face suddenly seemed garish. Too perfect. Too much like a mask. You always thought you were very smart. My voice was very calm. So calm it even surprised me. You thought Fu Sichen was the one who truly understood you. You share the same academic background, the same social circles, the same topics. And I was just a wild road kid who fought his way up from the bottom, good at nothing but making money. So you looked down on me from your bones.
That's not how it was.
She suddenly spoke, her voice trembling slightly.
Then what was it?
You weren't like this when you took 300 million in equity. I stood up, walked around the other side of the desk, and looked down at Jiang Wanning sitting in her chair.
You thought I didn't know.
You thought I couldn't see.
You thought as long as you kept Fu Sichen hidden behind the curtain, it'd never be able to catch your trail. But Jiang Wanning, you got one thing wrong. What thing? The thing I'm best at in this life is digging out the truth, bit by bit, when no one else believes in me. I tossed the last document in front of her. It was a notarized certificate, a thick stack, every page stamped with the notary office's steel seal. All the transfer records, hotel records, call records, complete with times, locations, amounts, and frequencies. I've had them all notarized. Combined with the evidence of you forging contracts to frame me, the two together add up to charges of occupational embezzlement, forging financial documents, and framing an estimated sentence starting at 15 years. Jiang Wanning's face went white all at once. Slowly she stood up from the chair, then slowly crouched down, and finally ended up on her knees on the floor. It wasn't the kind of hysterical weeping breakdown. It was a silent, bone-deep collapse. Her knees hit the floor with a dull thud, her high heels askew. Huo Chenzhou. She raised her head, her voice hoarse. For the sake of 4 years as husband and wife, can you? 4 years as husband and wife? I cut her off, crouching down to meet her eyes. Jiang Wanning, when you sent me inside, did you think about those 4 years? Did you ever think that while you were processing the share transfer, I was in handcuffs, pinned to the iron chair in the interrogation room, staring at those 8 red characters on the wall, thinking for the entire night? The tears in her eyes finally rolled down, one after another, streaking 2 dark lines through her carefully applied makeup. I had no other way. She covered her face, her voice leaking through her fingers. Fu Sichen said as long as we removed your shares, the company could refinance and multiply several times over, and then…
I laughed, a bit coldly.
Then you two fly off into the sunset, take my money, and start over in a new city? She didn't answer. In truth, she didn't need to. I straightened up, walked to the door, and looked back at her one last time. She was still on her knees, her expensive suit crumpled into a mess, her hair disheveled, her makeup ruined. This was the most wretched I had seen her in the 8 years I'd known her.
I won't send you to prison, I said.
She jerked her head up, a flicker of hope in her eyes.
I'll leave you out here so you can watch with your own eyes how I take back, one piece at a time, everything you schemed so hard to get.
I finished these words, pushed the door open, and walked out. The corridor was long. My leather shoes struck the marble floor, each step steady and sure. Behind me came the sound of something being smashed violently. Fu Sichen was not like Jiang Wanning. Jiang Wanning's collapse was limp and broken. Fu Sichen's was arrogance held up by sheer bravado. The day I met him was a Saturday. North City's first snow of the winter was falling. The location was not one he chose. It was one I chose, the top-floor conference room of Rock Capital's headquarters. 360-degree panoramic glass windows, snowflakes blowing sideways in the wind outside, the entire city silently sprawling beneath our feet. Fu Sichen had been invited by Gu Jingchuan. When he walked, he was still adjusting his cufflinks. His suit was custom-tailored, his leather shoes polished to a shine. He radiated an arrogance that said, "What can you possibly do to me?" He sat down across from me, crossed his legs, and even flashed a smile at me. "President, Huo, how are you adjusting to the new identity? Do you need my advice?" "No need," I cut him off.
I didn't call you here today to exchange pleasantries.
I pulled a black folder from the drawer, flipped open the first page, and turned it to face him. From 2009 to 2015, during your time practicing at North City Dongfang Law Firm, you acted as legal counsel for the IPO of 4 companies. 3 of those companies had material financial fraud in their first annual reports after listing, involving a total of over 1.2 billion in inflated revenue. You signed off on the listing materials for every single one. Fu Sichen uncrossed his legs. He stared at the document but didn't reach for it. His professional instinct as a lawyer told him never to physically touch any written evidence, but his eyes betrayed him. His pupils were contracting slightly. That was years ago, he said, his tone still light. The statute of limitations has passed. The statute of limitations for commercial fraud is 10 years, Gu Jingchuan added from the side, neither too light nor too heavy. Attorney Fu, you should know that better than I do. Fu Sichen didn't respond. I flipped to the second page. In March of this year, through 3 shell companies you control, you siphoned 32 million in cash from Shengheng Group, using fictitious software procurement contracts. The money was laundered through 6 accounts and ultimately flowed into your personal account at an overseas bank. The transfer records, account opening information, the entire money trail, it's all here.
Third page.
In June of this year, you signed a private side agreement with one of Shengheng's suppliers.
You used Shengheng's order volume to promise the supplier an excessive procurement quota and extracted an 8% kickback.
In less than half a year, you netted 4.7 million. Fourth page. Last month during the trial of my equity case with Jiang Wanning, in order to stabilize Shengheng's stock price, you used a front account you controlled to buy 12 million worth of Shengheng shares on the secondary market. The source of the funds was the money you siphoned from the company at the beginning of the year. Do you know what that's called? I lifted my eyes to meet his. Stock market manipulation. Add up all the charges. Think about how many years you'll be sentenced to. The conference room fell silent for about a dozen seconds. Fu Sichen suddenly laughed, a loud laugh, jarringly loud in the empty conference room. Huo Chenzhou, you went through all this trouble to dig up this dirt on me, isn't it just a vent? He leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. But you've misunderstood one problem. Commercial disputes and commercial crimes are 2 different things. Everything you've mentioned at most it counts as regulatory violations, a civil penalty at worst. You want to put me away? You'll need to bring out something real. He spoke with full confidence. After all, he had been a criminal defense lawyer for 6 years and knew exactly what evidence could stand up in court and what couldn't. He probably figured that what I had just laid out would, at most, get his name on a list at the Securities Regulatory Commission. I wasn't in a hurry. I slowly flipped to the 5th page. In July 2018, you had Jiang Wanning assist you in forging a technology cooperation development agreement between Shengheng and a company called Junshi Technology. You used a fake company seal for Junshi Technology, and then used this forged agreement to secure a 50 million loan from the bank. After the money arrived, you gave Jiang Wanning 5 million and moved the remaining 45 million overseas. The smile on Fu Sichen's face finally cracked.
That loan has not been repaid.
The bank has classified it as subprime and reported it to the Economic Crimes Division. Using a fake seal and fake contracts to defraud a bank of loans, that's financial fraud. An amount exceeding 30 million is considered exceptionally large, and the starting sentence is life imprisonment. I pulled out a disc, tucked in the folder, and set it on the table. This disc contains the complete recording, the entire conversation between you and Jiang Wanning discussing how to forge the Junshi Technology Company seal. It's recorded very clearly.
Your voice, her voice, the time, the place, everything matches.
Fu Sichen's face completely changed. He stared at the disc, his Adam's apple bobbing. Where did you get that? Guess. Of course he couldn't guess. This disc was found by Huo Zhenting's people on Jiang Wanning's personal computer. She had secretly recorded that conversation, probably to use as leverage against Fu Sichen one day. Unfortunately for her, before she could ever use it, her deepest secret had become my weapon. Fu Sichen shot to his feet. His chair toppled backward and hit the floor with a loud crash. I'm telling you, Huo Chenzhou, even if you bring these things to court, they're useless. A surreptitious recording can't be used as admissible evidence. The conference room door was suddenly pushed open. It wasn't Gu Jingchuan, and it wasn't my assistants. It was 4 people wearing dark blue uniforms. The badges on their chests reflected the cold winter light of North City with a metallic sheen. The leader walked up to Fu Sichen, showed his identification and a piece of paper.
Fu Sichen, you're suspected of financial fraud and forging financial documents.
You are now formally detained in accordance with the law. Please cooperate with the investigation. Fu Sichen's face in that instant turned an ashen gray I had never seen before. He turned his head to look at me, his lips moving as if to spit out some final threat, but all that squeezed from his throat was an unintelligible sound. 2 officers flanked him, each grabbing an arm, and started leading him toward the door. He stumbled a few steps, then suddenly struggled, twisting his head back to shout at me.
What about Jiang Wanning?
Did you put her inside too?
I didn't answer.
Answer me.
She's my woman, let her come in.
I want to talk to her.
His voice grew more and more hoarse, sounding less and less like an elite polished lawyer and more like a gambler clutching at the last straw in the abyss.
Shez upstairs, I said.
26th floor, packing up her things. You can go ask if she wants to see you. The officers dragged him out. The sound of his struggling faded down the hallway, finally cut off completely by the closing of the elevator doors. The conference room returned to silence. Gu Jingchuan walked to my side, watching the snow falling heavier and heavier outside the window, and said his case, the evidence chain is complete. The procuratorate has already signed the arrest warrant.
He won't be coming out.
I nodded, closed the black folder, and put it back in the drawer. Then I stood up and walked to the window, looking down at the street below. The police car, red taillights flashing, slowly disappeared into the vast white curtain of snow.
Fu Sichen, goodbye.
No. We won't meet again. Jiang Wanning's last appearance in the public eye was at the site of Shengheng Group's extraordinary general meeting of shareholders. That day, I sat on the rostrum. The nameplate in front of me bore 4 words, Chairman Huo Chenzhou. Over 100 people sat below the stage, shareholder representatives, institutional investors, financial media reporters. Cameras were aimed at me, flashbulbs popping every few seconds. Jiang Wanning sat in the 3rd row near the aisle. She was no longer the CFO, nor even an employee of Shengheng. She was there as a minor shareholder holding 3% of the shares. 3%, that was all that remained of her equity, undiluted and unrecovered. Back when she was parading around with my 17%, she probably never imagined she would one day sit in the audience, as a bystander, watching me firmly take the chairman's seat with over 51% of the shares. Her condition made everyone in the room who knew her gasp. She had lost weight. Not the normal kind of weight loss, but the kind where she seemed to have collapsed inward, as if a bone had been pulled out of her body. Her old business suits hung on her empty and shapeless, the collarbone visible at her neckline so prominent it looked like 2 deep grooves. Her makeup was no longer meticulous. Her eyeshadow was applied crookedly, and a smear of lipstick had strayed beyond the edge of her lips.
She was completely oblivious.
The most frightening thing was her eyes. It was a scattered, unfocused gaze. She didn't focus on people, didn't focus on objects. Her eyes drifted around the room like a moth, unable to find a place to land. The shareholders' meeting proceeded item by item. I gave the chairman's inaugural address, announced the new board of directors, and unveiled the next phase of strategic planning. Applause came in waves from the audience, but I noticed Jiang Wanning never clapped. She sat quietly in her corner of the 3rd row, hands resting on her knees, like a schoolchild waiting for the dismissal bell. When the meeting ended, I stepped down from the rostrum and prepared to leave through the side door. Jiang Wanning suddenly stood up and took a couple of steps toward me.
Huo Chenzhou, she called.
She was still calling me by my old name.
I stopped and turned around. Gu Jingchuan instinctively stepped half a pace forward to shield me. I waved my hand to indicate it was fine.
Jiang Wanning, is there something you need?
My tone was very flat, the way you'd address an unfamiliar former colleague. She stood about 3 steps away, her lips moving as if trying to organize her words, but her brain seemed unable to process complex logic anymore. What came out was fragmented, like a broken radio.
Last night,
I had a dream. I dreamed we were still in that rented room from before, you writing code, me balancing the books. Back then we only had one office. The heating wasn't warm enough in winter. You wrapped your old down jacket around my legs. As she spoke, her eyes reddened.
I just wanted to ask you.
That rented room.
Do you still remember where it was?
I looked at her and was silent for about 5 seconds.
I remember, I said.
But that place was later given up by Fu Sichen when he canceled the lease. At the sound of Fu Sichen's name, her body visibly swayed, as if someone had pushed her in the chest. Fu Sichen. He lied to me. Her voice suddenly became very, very soft. So soft I almost couldn't hear it. He told me as long as I did what he said, once we got the equity, the company would double in value and you wouldn't really go to prison. He said he had planned everything, that all the evidence wouldn't pass the court review, that you would be released on bail pending trial. He said whatever he said, and you believed every word. I interrupted her.
What I said for 8 years, you didn't believe a single word.
That sentence was like a blade, accurately stabbing into her last line of defense. Jiang Wanning stood rooted to the spot, her lips beginning to tremble. Not the kind of trembling from crying, but a kind of tremor that meant, on a physiological level, she was losing control. Her shoulders, her arms, her knees all trembling slightly, as if the last few threads supporting her inside were snapping one by one. Reporters nearby raised their cameras. Gu Jingchuan signaled with a glance, and 2 security personnel stepped in to block the cameras. But Jiang Wanning noticed none of this. Her eyes were locked on me, pupils widely dilated, her eye sockets brimming with water.
Could you? She said could you twice, but the words that followed simply wouldn't come out.
Could I what?
I asked.
Could you forgive me? As these words left her mouth, tears burst from her eyes, as if someone had turned on a faucet. Her knees buckled and she knelt down again, just like that day in the office. But this time she didn't stay silent. She knelt on the floor, her face lifted toward me, and began to chant my name over and over.
Huo Chenzhou, Huo Chenzhou, Huo Chenzhou. I was wrong. I truly know I was wrong.
Take the company back? I don't care anymore. Take everything. Take my shares too. Don't go. Her voice grew louder, more shrill, eventually becoming a kind of near-howling mumble. Everyone in the room was stunned. The cameraman, who had been packing up his equipment, stopped moving. Reporters midway through closing their notebooks forgot to close them. Even the security personnel at the door were frozen in shock. I looked down at Jiang Wanning on her knees.
8 years of a relationship, 4 years of marriage.
I had genuinely loved this woman once, but now, watching her crumble at my feet, there was nothing in my heart. It was perfectly clean, because I knew her collapse wasn't about me as a person. It was because she had realized that after all her calculations, she had picked the wrong man and bet on the wrong side. The man she chose, Fu Sichen, had used an elaborately woven web of lies to push the rest of her life into the abyss. And the man she betrayed, the man standing in front of her right now, was already on a completely new level, one she didn't even have the standing to look up at.
I don't hate you, I said. My voice not loud, but enough for her to hear clearly.
Because you're not worth it. I turned and walked away. The side door closed behind me, cutting off the sounds from the conference hall. I had walked about a dozen meters and could still faintly hear her voice through the door. The same 3 words, repeated over and over. Huo Chenzhou. Huo Chenzhou. Like a broken recorder, Gu Jingchuan walked beside me. After a stretch, he finally spoke. Her mental state doesn't seem right.
Should we arrange for someone to take her to a hospital?
No need, I said.
The person she needs to see most right now isn't me. It's a doctor. 2 days later, I learned the rest from Gu Jingchuan. After the shareholders' meeting ended, Jiang Wanning was helped out by security and sat on the lobby sofa of Shengheng Tower for 2 full hours without moving. She didn't speak, didn't drink water, didn't eat anything, just sat there, murmuring my name over and over. The property management contacted her family, but her parents had cut ties with her long ago because of her involvement with Fu Sichen. In the end, they had to call the police. When the officers arrived, she suddenly began laughing hysterically, breathless, and then started removing her coat in the lobby, piece by piece, shouting, "It's too hot, too hot." She was taken to the North City Mental Health Center. The diagnosis was acute stress disorder with tendencies of schizophrenia. When Gu Jingchuan showed me the hospital report, I was sitting in the study of the Huo family's old residence, a cup of Longjing tea already gone cold in front of me. Outside the window, the snow had stopped. The courtyard was a blanket of white, silent as another world.
Right now, Jiang Wanning does only one thing every day, he said.
She sits on the bed in her ward, looks out the window, and says your name. The doctors say she may need a very long time to recover, or she may never get better for the rest of her life. I set the report down on the desk. Understood.
I only said that one word.
Then I stood up, walked to the window, and looked at the parasol tree in the courtyard, its branches bent low under the weight of the snow. Winter had come early this year, and the snow was heavy. But no matter how long winter in North City lasts, there will always be a day when it passes. 3 months later, spring comes slowly to North City. Even in April, the wind was still cool, but the sunlight had changed, shifting from the pale white of winter to a pale gold with a hint of warmth. I stood before the floor-to-ceiling windows on the 52nd floor of Rock Capital's headquarters, watching the city slowly light up in the early morning light. On my desk lay a document, its cover stamped with the title Huo Family Business Empire Integration Plan. In these 3 months, I had done several things. First, the restructuring of Shengheng Group was completed. I purged the management layers that Jiang Wanning and Fu Sichen had infiltrated, top to bottom. 4 of the 7 vice presidents were replaced, 15 of the 23 department heads were transferred, and all personnel in the finance department involved with the accounts during Jiang Wanning's tenure were either reassigned or dismissed. Some said my tactics were too ruthless. I only replied with one sentence, If you don't cut out the rotten flesh, the wound will never heal. After the restructuring, Shengheng's core business shifted from standalone enterprise software to the industrial internet track, vertically integrated with 3 other tech companies under Rock Capital. When the first quarter financial report came out, revenue was up 67% year-on-year, and net profit nearly tripled. The capital market's reaction was the most direct. Shengheng's stock price climbed from $21 at the time I took over to $42, and its market capitalization broke 30 billion. Second, I reorganized Rock Capital's investment portfolio. After Huo Zhenting fully entrusted me with the voting rights, I spent the first month going over all 17 investment portfolios one by one. I cut 4 long-term loss-making projects and concentrated capital into the new energy and smart manufacturing sectors.
Jiang said I made decisions faster than any investor he had ever met.
I told him I'd spent 8 years grinding at Shengheng, so what to invest in and what not to invest in had long been carved into my bones. The third thing, and the one that took the most thought, was the family integration of the Huo business empire. Huo Zhenting and I had 7 video calls while he was still inside. Every single one was about this. He said he'd fought for most of his life and built up a sizable empire, but it was scattered, the various subsidiaries not forming any synergy. Before he came out, he wanted to see a neat and orderly Huo group. I used 3 months to mold that scattered sand into a single rock.
The new Huo group, headquartered in this very building of Rock Capital.
Shengheng was the core of the tech division, Rock Capital was the flagship of financial investment, and combined with the Huo family's original layouts in real estate and logistics, 4 pillars supported a business empire with total book assets exceeding 120 billion. On the day I signed, Gu Jingchuan placed a thick stack of documents in front of me and smiled, saying, "President Huo, this building will officially bear the surname Huo from now on." I picked up the pen and signed the 3 characters Huo Chenzhou on the final document. The strokes were very steady, not a single one trembling. These 3 characters had taken me 32 years to learn to write. After everything settled, I made a trip to provincial number
1 prison.
Zhenting's case was still going through the procedures. Gu Jingchuan said it would take at least another half-year before he could get out. But every time I visited him, he was in great spirits, his back ramrod straight, his voice strong and full. It didn't look like he was serving time. It looked more like he was on vacation. During that visit, I showed him the restructuring plan and financial reports. He put on his reading glasses and flipped through them page by page, very slowly. When he finished, he set the documents down, removed his glasses, and rubbed his eyes. "If your mother were still alive," he said, his voice a little hoarse, seeing all this, she'd definitely start nagging me again, saying, "Look at you, leaving the kid out there for so many years, and he's got more promise than you."
I smiled.
"Dad, in half a year when you come out, I'll save the chairman's seat for you."
Get lost! Huo Zhenting waved his hand and laughed.
"I've been cooped up so long. The only thing I want when I get out is a few days of peace." "You're doing great. Don't even think about dumping the load." After he said this, he suddenly stopped smiling and stared at me through the glass for a long time. "Chenzhou, there's one thing I've never asked you." "Go ahead. Do you hate me?" 32 years I didn't find you, leaving you to suffer all alone out there." I was silent for a few seconds. To say I didn't resent it at all would be a lie. But the moment I saw you in the washroom of Beijiao Detention Center, that resentment disappeared.
Why?
Because when you saved me, you didn't yet know I was your son. You helped a stranger, a young man you didn't know, just because he reminded you of someone. People like that are rare in this world. Being the son of a man like that is my good fortune. Huo Zhenting's eyes reddened, but he stubbornly didn't let the tears fall. He simply reached out and, through the glass, pressed his rough, bark-like palm against it in a patting gesture.
I reached out too, my palm meeting his through the glass.
Father and son, neither said another word.
Leaving the prison, the car drove directly to Shengyang Tower. Today was the first all-hands meeting after the new board of directors was formed. 2,300 employees of Shengheng Group were waiting for me. When I walked into the lobby, the receptionist stood up and said, "Good day, President Huo." I nodded at her and walked into the elevator, pressing the button for the 26th floor. This president's office had been Jiang Wanning's territory 3 months ago. After I moved, I had it completely renovated. The walls were changed to a light gray. The carpet was new and the abstract painting that used to hang on the wall was taken down and gifted to the building's maintenance lounge. In its place was a giant framed photograph of the North City skyline. In the photo, the entire city spread out beneath the setting sun. Skyscrapers rose everywhere, traffic flowing like a river.
You couldn't tell which building was Shengheng and which was Rock Capital.
They had all merged into the texture of the city, becoming part of the scenery. I stood before the window. Outside was North City's most bustling CBD, the high-rises shimmering with a blue-gray light in the afternoon sun. My gaze crossed the rooftops I once used to look up at and rested on the distant skyline of the city. Gu Jingchuan knocked and came in. President Huo, the all-hands meeting starts in 15 minutes.
I put your speech on the desk.
I won't need the script, I said.
Gu. Jingchuan smiled slightly, nodded, and turned to leave.
Old Gu, I stopped him. Any news from Jiang Wanning's side? He stopped and turned around.
Still the same.
The mental health center called last week.
They said occasionally she becomes lucid for a few minutes, and will ask the nurse what day it is, whether Shengheng is still around.
But soon she slips back into that state. Last week, she suddenly called out your name in her ward. The nurse went over and asked her what she wanted to say. She only said one thing.
What thing?
She said, he must be very busy right now.
I said nothing.
Gu Jingchuan waited a few seconds.
Seeing my silence, he gently closed the door and left. I stood before the floor-to-ceiling windows, looking at the April sky over North City, bright and boundless. A gust of wind blew, scattering a few clouds outside the window. Sunlight poured down without obstruction, gilding the entire city in a pale gold. 15 minutes later, I walked into the meeting hall. The eyes of 2,300 employees turned toward me. I walked to the podium and adjusted the microphone. Everyone, I am Huo Chenzhou. The room hushed for a moment, then erupted in thunderous applause. I raised my hand, and the applause gradually subsided. Starting today, together with all of you, I will write the new rules of Shengheng.
32 years.
At last I knew who I was.
I am Huo Chenzhou,
son of Huo Zhenting and Shen Ruosi,
helmsman of Rock Capital and Shenggong Group. The skyline of the city, from this moment on, is mine to draw.